Hello again on the Tech Exec podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, advisor, consultant, and the person who's going to help you triple impact per engineer. Today, let's talk about evaluations. And I'm not talking about the dire state of startup evaluations, which I'm assuming you're aware of because, well, man, it's tough out there. But I'm talking about the actual values your startup, your organization has. This is very much important if you're an executive, and even more so if you're a founder in a startup. Now, I oftentimes see executives and founders who seem to think that values have to be something that no one can really object to. However, that's looking at things wrongheadedly because at the end of the day, I get why we think that values should be the greatest common denominator. We don't want to cause resentment. We don't want to make anyone offended. However, when that's the case, what we usually end up with is a bunch of values that mimic what I used to see on the walls at IBM. You know, those sorts of motivational posters that seem ironic but aren't, that have no real meaning to them, that just seem redundant. Like, we do our best, we care. Yeah, because you're going to find a different company that has a different set of values that says, we don't care or we don't try. No, that's not going to happen. And therefore, those values mean nothing. Actually, they might mean something that's even worse than nothing because you'd be better off not even mentioning these sorts of lukewarm values as opposed to coming up with something that might alienate someone. So when you're considering what values your company should have, your organization should have, start by realizing that the job to be done of values is to help attract the right set of people and help them do the work in a way that is aligned with how you want your company to achieve, with how you vision your company. So, for example, again, these sorts of lukewarm values that are like, we care, we try, we're ethical, mean nothing because you're not going to find a company that has said the counter. You're going to be hard pressed at least. But a good set of values has values that could be very logically decided against. And therefore, they're going to help you attract the right people. Because the lukewarm values, those who are devoid of any real meaning, they might not alienate anyone, but they're also not the types of sets of values that are going to attract people. They're going to make you stand out. And those are going to harm you when it comes to hiring talent, but also when it comes to you personally, because you're not tofu. You don't go well with anything, just acquire the taste around you. You're a person, you're a human being, and whatever values that actually apply to you matter because that should be the type of organization that you want to create around you. I'm not saying that you should be trying to create an organization where everyone is in your image. However, you should be leading a team that you're proud of leading, and that can only happen if the sets of values that you're using to measure, to determine whether you're on track, are values that actually also apply to you yourself as the leader. And I've seen many founders who have struggled with this for years because at the essence, at the core, they had a mismatch with their co-founders about basic values. And they tried to deny it. They tried to ignore it. And usually these things only get solved by having a candid conversation about this and trying to solve this and getting realigned, or realizing that this is not the place for you, as tough and as dire as that might seem. And therefore, I want you to right now consider the values for your team using two lenses. First, consider whether these are actual values at all. Because if they're just fluff values, you can throw them out of the window and start anew. No one's going to bat an eye. No one's going to complain when you do that because probably they're not even thinking about those values at all. Good values are values that are used day to day in how people work. They help us make better decisions or different decisions. They help us decide when there's an argument about one way or another, about creating our strategy for the next year, about tailoring the roadmap. And if they're not used for that, they're useless. That's precisely what it means. So if you have fluff values, who cares? Start anew. You have a blank slate. However, if you already have some values, even if they're not written, we sometimes have values that get passed on between people as part of our culture. For example, we will do anything to close a sale. You might not have it written on the wall, but that might be de facto how your culture has formed. And if that's the case, regardless of whether this is a written value or not, I want you to consider, do you agree with this? Is this thing aligned with who you are at the core? Because if not, speak up, change it. You cannot live in denial. You shouldn't. That's not how one becomes the best executive and leader you can, and also not what your team deserves. So think about that. We just started the new Jewish year. It's time for new beginnings. You can realign and set your sights on creating an amazing, impact-driving, culture-shattering organization in 2024. You've got a full quarter ahead of you to start the shift. If you need any help, my email's in the show notes, along with links to my newsletter, my books, and much more. Thank you for listening. See you here next week.